Hi. So if we're really going to start breaking down these instructors and their different kind of the styles they use, we probably want to start obviously with the first one. This first instructor started off right off the bat with some issues. He walked in, he was late, and after he was obviously late because the students were already expressing they were about to leave, which implies that they'd been waiting there for a while, he wasn't apologetic or sympathetic at all towards their, even though they had the eagerness to learn and they were punctual and they were there on time, he didn't care and he wasn't really interested in apologizing for his tardiness. He came in, he jumped right into the lesson without establishing any type of rapport of any kind, which is typically what a good instructor needs to start with. And then he just kind of jumped into it. Now, even though he got right into the subject matter, it didn't seem like he was really the subject matter expert, mostly because he was constantly looking at his lesson plan. He didn't have very good eye contact. And then when somebody did ask him a question, he was short back to them and he actually didn't ever answer their question. I assume that his lesson plan, like with most lesson plans, have mandatory, they're called lead-off questions, which is the first question you would ask within that section of teaching. It kind of gets the ball rolling with the students and it lets them know really what you're going to talk about, as well as, some kind of like attention getter step. Usually they're quotes or key phrases that had to do with the lesson. A lot of times you ask them about any kind of prior reading or anything they've done with this. Might sound something like that. He didn't do any of those things. So that's something he really needs to have. You probably also want to carry around a smaller book. He was carrying around that giant binder as with all the other instructors. We'll talk about that in a minute. But typically when you're moving around and you're teaching, you want to have something small so that it's not distracting to the students, because all they start following is the movement of this giant book. Or if you have to set it down because it's too heavy, all they see is you leaning over and that becomes distracting as well. The second instructor was a little bit better, but the hand gestures were very distracting. I actually have this issue myself, is when they're talking, they talk with their hands a lot, which is okay as long as they're below eye level, because when you're like this, all you see is my hands, because your eyes track movement of the hands, and they're also trying to follow my face, so this gets distracting. Really, it's okay to talk with your hands when it's natural, but you also want to make sure they're kept below eye level. When we're teaching instruction, something these people really need to brush up on is the certain gestures and body movement that can be distracting, like hand motions, including counting as you start listing main points, because this gets very distracting, as well as remaining too stationary. One thing she did do, though, that I was actually surprised about that was really good is she didn't talk to the board. A lot of times people will turn around and they're writing on the board, take notes, and they'll talk to it, which is distracting for students because it makes them feel like you don't really care about their answers or that you're not really paying attention, probably because you're trying to jot your notes down. So she actually turned around, wrote her notes, and stopped, which is actually a good thing. And she didn't have too many notes because that could become an issue too. You don't want to completely rewrite the lesson plan onto the board and then just not speak for the entire time because it creates awkward, dead silence. She did move a little bit, but she did something that's commonly called waltzing, which is where she moved in a pattern that can also become distracting over a period of time. Granted, their room is kind of small, so they couldn't really have a whole lot of use of space, as it were, but her constant pattern-type flow of motion can become distracting to certain students, especially if they're there for any length of time. She did talk a lot, and her energy was really high. You kind of need to find the balance between high energy to be excited for your students as well as allowing them to speak. Typically, a good instructor will speak anywhere from 20 to 40% of the time and let the students utilize a method of guided discussion to come to their own conclusions the 60% of the time, the rest of it. So because she talked too much, she was over energetic. It can almost be off-putting to some people. The third video, this instructor had zero rapport when they all walked in. He was already looking at his lesson plan, which shows that he really wasn't prepared, because if you were prepared enough for a lesson, you don't need to immediately be in that lesson right before. You should already kind of know what you're going to talk about. And you want to start with some kind of how was your weekend, how was your weekend, or how was your evening, how was your whatever, your morning, did you get coffee? And then once again, you want to get into that lead-off question was, what did you think of the reading? Or this quote was this about this leadership style. Something like Mayor Giuliani's quote from the 9/11, the mayor who was mayor of New York during 9/11. He has a quote about encouraging people to want to follow you, not just doing something to appease the boss. That's a good opening for any kind of HR or leadership type of lesson plan. So that's really a good place to start. But also get their feedback, get them talking, warm them up. Another aspect that this guy needs to think about is that he was very monotone. You have to have some inflection in your voice, or you're just going to put people to sleep. They're not going to be able to follow what you're saying, and they're just going to be basically looking at, the things you're doing. He also had zero body movement. He was very stationary, didn't move, and he had no eye contact. There was no option, so seemed like he was doing more of a formal lecture aspect, but he's not really in the appropriate setting for that. If you're going to do somewhat of a formal lecture, you need to be in a wider setting with a lot of people. When you're in a small, intimate group like this, you need to let them talk. You need to have that guided discussion concept. Then when he finally did get a question, he shut that question down pretty hard, which ultimately closes off the student, makes them not want to engage in the future, which can be problematic if they don't fully understand the material and they're trying to kind of piece it together. If you're not interested in their responses or interested in their feedback, they're never going to get what they need, which is the overall goal of why we have training at all. So, based on all these, every one of these instructors needed work. It was hard to get a really good synopsis of how they all were as instructors on a minute and a half each, but that was kind of the gauge I got from just a little bit. I think that the best one out of the three was the second one, even though she had some issues. She still had a couple good things as well. I didn't really see anything good from the first or third instructor. Both of them really struggled. They really need to watch that agitation and response to the students, as well as how they prepare for the lesson plan. Anyway, thank you. Bye.